Hello everyone, and tonight, let's travel quietly back to the medieval world. A time of candlelit castles, misty villages, and slow, quiet nights. But here's a curious question. Why did many medieval people rarely bathe? Was it because water was scarce? Or did they actually believe bathing could be dangerous? As the night grows calm and your mind begins to relax, we'll gently uncover the surprising reasons behind medieval bathing habits and the quiet routines of everyday life centuries ago. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the soft rhythm of history guide you into a peaceful sleep. For many modern people, the idea that medieval men and women rarely bathed can sound shocking, almost unbelievable, because daily showers and strong soaps are considered normal parts of life today. However, when we step into the world of medieval Europe and try to understand the realities of their time, the situation becomes far more complex than simply saying people were dirty. Bathing habits in the medieval period were shaped by climate, technology, social beliefs, religion, medicine, economics, and daily survival. In fact, many medieval people did value cleanliness, but the conditions of their lives made regular bathing difficult or even risky. What seems strange today was often logical in the context of their world. One of the biggest reasons bathing was rare was the challenge of heating water. In the Middle Ages, there was no running hot water, no water heaters, and no plumbing systems like those we enjoy today. If someone wanted to bathe, water had to be collected from a river, stream, well, or public fountain. Then it had to be carried home in heavy buckets. After that, the water needed to be heated over a fire, which required wood or charcoal. Gathering firewood itself was hard work, and sometimes expensive. Heating enough water to fill a tub could take hours of labor. Because of this effort, bathing was often saved for special occasions rather than daily routines. Climate also played an important role. Much of medieval Europe experienced cold weather for a large part of the year. Stone houses, castles, and cottages were poorly insulated and often very cold inside. Without modern heating systems, taking a bath in winter could be extremely uncomfortable. Wet skin in a cold environment could quickly lead to chills or illness. Many people believed that exposing the body to cold air after bathing could weaken the body and make someone vulnerable to disease. Because survival during winter was already difficult, avoiding unnecessary risks became common practice. Medical beliefs of the time also discouraged frequent bathing. Medieval doctors followed ideas inherited from ancient Greek and Roman medical theories, especially the concept of the four humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. According to this theory, health depended on keeping these bodily fluids balanced. Physicians believed that the skin contained pores that could open and close. Warm baths were thought to open these pores. While that might sound good, doctors feared that open pores allowed harmful air or disease to enter the body. During times of epidemic diseases such as the plague, many medical authorities actually warned people against bathing too often, believing that it weakened the body's defenses. Religious attitudes also influenced bathing habits. In early medieval Christian thought, excessive concern with the body could be seen as vanity or indulgence. Some religious leaders encouraged modesty and simplicity in daily life. While cleanliness itself was not considered sinful, luxurious bathing could sometimes be associated with pleasure or moral weakness. Monks and nuns, for example, often lived simple lives with limited bathing as part of their discipline. However, it is important to note that religious institutions did not completely forbid bathing. In fact, many monasteries maintained basic hygiene routines, and sometimes had bath facilities for health reasons. Another reason bathing declined over time was the disappearance of Roman bathing culture. In ancient Roman times, large public bathhouses were common throughout the empire. These bathhouses were social centers where people could wash, relax, exercise, and meet friends. They were supported by advanced engineering systems that heated water and maintained large pools. But after the fall of the Roman Empire, many of these bathhouses fell into disrepair or were abandoned. Maintaining such complex structures required strong governments, stable economies, and skilled engineers, which were less common in the early medieval period. Without these public facilities, bathing became much less convenient. Urban living conditions also played a role. Medieval towns and cities were crowded and often lacked proper sanitation systems. Waste from homes, animals, and workshops was frequently dumped into streets or nearby rivers. Water sources could easily become contaminated. Because of this, people were cautious about using certain water sources for bathing, especially if they believed the water carried disease or foul substances. Drinking water was already precious, and people sometimes preferred to reserve clean water for cooking and drinking, rather than washing. Economic differences influenced bathing as well. Wealthy individuals in castles or noble households sometimes had access to wooden tubs and servants who could heat and carry water for them. These baths were still not daily events, but they occurred more often than among the poor. For peasants and labourers, however, daily life involved long hours of physical work in fields, forests, or workshops. After such exhausting labour, preparing a bath might feel like an unnecessary luxury. Instead, people cleaned themselves in simpler ways, such as washing hands and faces in small basins, or wiping the body with cloths. Despite the common belief that medieval people never washed, this is actually a misunderstanding. Many forms of personal hygiene existed even without full bathing. People often washed their hands before meals, especially in noble households, where servants poured water over guests' hands at the table. Combing hair was common, and lice combs have been found in archaeological sites. Linen undergarments were widely worn and changed regularly, helping absorb sweat and keep the body cleaner. Because linen could be washed more easily than wool or outer garments, it served as an important layer of hygiene. Public bathhouses did still exist in some medieval cities, particularly in the earlier medieval centuries. These bathhouses allowed people to wash and relax in warm water. However, over time many bathhouses gained reputations for immoral behavior, such as gambling or prostitution. Authorities in some regions began to close them for moral or public health reasons. Later, during outbreaks of diseases like the plague, bathhouses were sometimes shut down out of fear that they helped spread illness. Another interesting aspect of medieval cleanliness involved perfumes and herbs. Because full bathing was not always practical, people often used scented oils, herbs, and flowers to freshen themselves or their homes. Herbs like lavender, rosemary, and sage were used in washing water or placed in rooms to improve the smell of indoor spaces. Clothing might also be stored with fragrant plants to keep it smelling pleasant. These practices show that medieval people did care about personal comfort and odour, even if their methods were different from modern habits. Rural life sometimes offered more opportunities for washing than city life. Peasants living near rivers or streams might wash themselves during warmer months while working in the fields or caring for animals. Summer festivals or seasonal celebrations could also involve bathing in natural water sources. However, these experiences were usually occasional rather than daily routines. Travellers during the medieval period also described bathing customs that varied across regions. In some areas, particularly in parts of Eastern Europe and Scandinavia, steam baths or saunas were more common. These traditions involved heating stones and creating steam to clean the body through sweating and washing. Such practices show that bathing habits were not identical across the medieval world. Cultural traditions and geography shaped them in different ways. Clothing itself also helped reduce the need for constant bathing. Medieval clothing often consisted of multiple layers. The inner linen layer absorbed sweat and oils from the body, while the outer wool garments provided warmth and protection. By washing the linen layer regularly, people could maintain a degree of cleanliness even if they did not frequently wash their entire bodies. Another important factor was the rhythm of medieval life. People worked closely with nature, agriculture, and seasonal cycles. Much of their time and energy was devoted to producing food, maintaining homes, and surviving harsh winters. Activities that required large amounts of water, fuel, or time were often reserved for special occasions. Bathing might take place before important religious holidays, weddings, or major social events. Modern historians have also noted that the idea of medieval people never bathing has sometimes been exaggerated by later writers. During the Renaissance and early modern periods, people sometimes looked back at the Middle Ages as a dark or primitive time. This created stereotypes that portrayed medieval life as much dirtier than it really was. Archaeological discoveries and historical documents suggest that while bathing was less frequent than today, people still practiced many forms of hygiene within the limits of their environment. Understanding medieval bathing habits reminds us that everyday practices are shaped by technology, culture, and available resources. Today, hot water flows instantly from taps, heating systems warm our homes, and soap is widely available. In contrast, medieval people lived in a world where every bucket of water required physical effort and every piece of firewood had value. Their choices about bathing were not simply about comfort, but about practicality, survival, and the beliefs of their time. When we imagine a medieval village at dawn, with smoke rising from chimneys, and people preparing for a day of farming or craft work, we see a community focused on endurance and routine. Bathing was just one small part of life, among many other responsibilities. While modern standards of hygiene have changed, life in medieval times was shaped by a constant need to balance effort, resources, and survival. And this balance influenced nearly every daily habit, including personal hygiene. While bathing was not entirely absent from medieval life, it often occurred far less frequently than in modern society, because the process itself demanded time, energy, and materials that were not always easy to obtain. For most people, especially peasants and labourers, daily life began before sunrise and ended after sunset, with little time left for activities considered non-essential. Farming, tending animals, repairing tools, collecting firewood, cooking meals, and maintaining shelters were all urgent responsibilities. In such a demanding lifestyle, heating large amounts of water simply to wash, the body could feel like an unnecessary use of energy when that same effort might instead be used to cook food or keep a home warm. Water itself, though seemingly abundant in nature, was not always easily accessible in a usable form. Wells had to be dug and maintained, rivers could freeze during winter, and streams could become muddy or polluted after storms or nearby human activity. Carrying water from a well required physical labour, especially when the water needed for a bath might require several heavy buckets. In many villages, wells were shared among many households, so collecting large quantities of water for bathing might delay others who needed water for drinking or cooking. Because of this, people often used water sparingly and focused their limited supply on essential tasks. Another element that reduced the frequency of bathing was the structure of medieval homes. Most houses, especially those of peasants, were small and simple. They usually consisted of 1 or 2 rooms with packed earth floors and minimal furniture. There was rarely a dedicated space for washing the body. A bath, when it happened, might involve a wooden tub placed in the main living area near the fire. Preparing such a bath required clearing space, heating water, filling the tub, and later emptying it, which could be messy and inconvenient. Without drains or plumbing, the used bath water had to be carried outside and thrown away manually. The idea of privacy also differed from modern expectations. Many medieval households contained several family members sharing the same small living space. Because bathing required undressing and using a large tub in the middle of the room, people might feel uncomfortable doing it frequently, especially when space was crowded. In some cases, families bathed sequentially using the same water to avoid wasting heated water, which made bathing more of a communal activity rather than a daily private routine. Medieval clothing also influenced hygiene habits. People often wore garments made of wool and linen, materials that behaved differently from modern synthetic fabrics. Linen undergarments were particularly important because they absorbed sweat and oils from the body. These garments could be removed and washed more easily than the heavier outer clothing. As a result, keeping linen clean became one of the main ways people maintained personal hygiene, by regularly changing and washing undergarments. Individuals could stay reasonably clean without bathing their entire bodies frequently. Seasonal rhythms further affected bathing habits. During the warmer months, people had more opportunities to wash themselves in rivers, lakes, or streams. Agricultural work often involved sweating and exposure to dirt, so washing in natural water sources could provide relief and refreshment. However, during colder seasons, these natural options became uncomfortable or even dangerous due to freezing temperatures. In many regions, winter lasted for months, making outdoor washing extremely unpleasant. Instead of bathing, people focused on staying warm and conserving fuel for cooking and heating. Another interesting detail of medieval life is the importance of grooming rather than bathing. Combs, brushes, and cloths were common tools used to maintain cleanliness. Combing the hair removed dirt and parasites such as lice, which were unfortunately common due to crowded living conditions. People also used damp cloths to wipe their faces, necks, and hands. This method, sometimes called spot washing, allowed individuals to clean the most visible and sensitive parts of the body without preparing a full bath. Such routines were quick and practical, fitting easily into daily life. Perfumed oils, scented waters, and herbal mixtures also played a role in maintaining freshness. Herbs such as mint, thyme, lavender, and rosemary were widely known for their pleasant scents and mild antiseptic properties. These plants could be placed in bathwater when available, or rubbed onto the skin and clothing. Floors in homes were sometimes covered with layers of straw mixed with aromatic herbs. As people walked across the floor, the herbs released fragrance, helping improve the smell of indoor spaces. These methods reflected the medieval desire to maintain comfort and pleasant surroundings, even without modern hygiene products. Social class strongly influenced access to bathing opportunities. Nobles and wealthy merchants sometimes had private bathing facilities within castles or large homes. These baths might involve large wooden tubs, heated water carried by servants, and scented oils or soaps. Bathing in noble households could become a leisurely event accompanied by conversation or relaxation. However, even among the wealthy, daily bathing was not the norm, because preparing such baths still required significant labor from servants. In contrast, peasants often relied on simpler washing methods. A small wooden basin filled with water might be used for washing hands, face, and occasionally feet. Because peasants spent much of their time outdoors, they were already exposed to rain, rivers, and sweat from labor, which sometimes provided a natural form of rinsing. Dirt from agricultural work was common, but it was often accepted as part of life rather than something that needed immediate removal. Public bathhouses, though not as widespread as in ancient Roman times, continued to exist in some medieval towns. These bathhouses were sometimes heated buildings with wooden tubs or pools where people could wash and relax. Visiting a bathhouse could be both a hygienic and social activity. Friends might meet there to talk, eat, or drink while bathing. However, over time, these establishments gained controversial reputations in some cities because they were occasionally associated with immoral activities. As authorities attempted to regulate or close them, access to public bathing gradually declined in certain regions. Fear of disease also played a powerful role in shaping attitudes toward bathing. During outbreaks of epidemic illnesses, people searched for explanations and protective measures even without scientific knowledge of bacteria or viruses. Because warm baths were believed to open the pores of the skin, some physicians warned that this might allow harmful vapors or invisible toxins to enter the body. As a result, people sometimes avoided bathing during times of widespread illness, believing it was safer to keep the skin protected. It is also important to remember that medieval society included many different cultures across Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. Bathing habits varied widely among these regions. In Islamic cities, for example, bathhouses known as hammams remained important parts of urban life. These facilities provided regular opportunities for washing and social interaction. In northern regions such as Scandinavia, steam baths or saunas were common and used frequently. These cultural differences show that the stereotype of a universally unwashed medieval population is not entirely accurate. The perception of cleanliness itself was different in the medieval mindset. Cleanliness did not necessarily mean removing every trace of sweat or dirt through soap and water. Instead, it involved maintaining a balanced and orderly body through grooming, clothing care, and moderate washing. Medieval people believed that excessive washing could weaken the body, while moderate cleaning preserved health. This idea fit with their broader medical theories about balance and harmony within the body. Daily routines also reinforced certain hygiene practices. Before meals, it was common for people to wash their hands, especially in households with guests. In noble homes, servants might pour water from decorative pitchers over the hands of diners before and after eating. This ritual was both practical and symbolic, reflecting respect for food and cleanliness at the table. Hand washing was considered important because people ate with their hands rather than forks, making clean hands essential for hygiene. Travelers and pilgrims also faced challenges related to bathing. Long journeys often meant sleeping outdoors, staying in crowded inns, or traveling through dusty roads. Opportunities for bathing were limited during such trips, so travelers relied heavily on wiping their faces and hands with cloths and occasionally washing in rivers when available. Pilgrimage routes sometimes included bathhouses or natural springs where travelers could rest and clean themselves. Children growing up in medieval households learned hygiene habits through observation and daily routines. Parents encouraged them to wash their hands before meals, comb their hair, and keep their clothing tidy. These simple practices helped maintain health even without frequent full-body baths. Communities often valued cleanliness in visible ways, such as neat clothing and well-kept hair, rather than focusing solely on bathing. Looking at medieval bathing habits through a modern lens can easily lead to misunderstandings. Today's expectations are shaped by indoor plumbing, heated water, and modern medicine. Another factor that influenced medieval bathing habits was the constant awareness of limited resources. Every household depended heavily on what could be produced locally. Firewood, for example, was essential not only for cooking but also for heating homes during cold seasons, because forests were sometimes controlled by local lords or carefully managed to prevent overuse. Gathering large amounts of wood for heating bath water was not always practical. Families often saved their fuel for preparing meals, baking bread, or keeping warm through the night. Heating water for bathing required several large pots over a fire, which meant more fuel consumption than many households were willing to spare on a regular basis. Water storage also presented difficulties. Today, clean water flows continuously through pipes. But in the medieval world, water had to be stored in barrels, clay jars, or wooden containers. These containers had limited capacity, and the water inside could become stale if kept for too long. Carrying fresh water from a well or stream was physically demanding work, often done multiple times a day just to meet basic needs, like drinking, cooking, and washing dishes. Because of this, using many buckets of water for a full bath seemed excessive to people who were accustomed to conserving every drop. The daily routine of medieval workers also left little time for elaborate bathing practices. Farmers began their work early in the morning, often before sunrise, and continued until dusk. Their days involved ploughing fields, planting crops, harvesting grain, tending animals, repairing fences, and transporting goods. These tasks required strength and endurance. After such long hours of physical labor, most people focused on eating, resting, and preparing for the next day rather than organizing a time-consuming bath. Quick washing with a cloth or basin was more realistic within the rhythm of their lives. Interestingly, medieval people often associated water with natural cycles rather than daily hygiene. Rivers and lakes were important sources of life, transportation, and trade. People fished in them, washed clothes along their banks, and sometimes watered animals there. Because these waters were used for many purposes, bathing in them frequently might have seemed less appealing or even risky, especially if animals or waste had contaminated the water upstream. During rainy seasons, rivers could become muddy and unsafe for washing. Another aspect that shaped bathing habits was the design of medieval settlements. Villages were typically built close together for protection and community support. Houses were constructed with timber frames, mud walls or stone, and roofs were often made of thatch or wooden shingles. Inside these houses, there was little space for large furniture, let alone permanent bathing structures. Even wealthy homes rarely had fixed bathtubs like modern bathrooms. Instead, portable tubs were used when needed, and then stored away afterward. This temporary setup made bathing feel like an occasional event rather than a daily routine. Soap itself was also different from what people use today. Medieval soap was often made from animal fat mixed with ashes or alkaline substances. While it could clean fabrics and skin, it was usually rough and not particularly fragrant. In some regions, soap was mainly used for washing clothes rather than for bathing the body. People relied more on rinsing with water and scrubbing with cloths than on lathering themselves with soap as modern bathers do. Despite these limitations, medieval people still placed value on appearing neat and respectable. Grooming practices played a large role in everyday life. Hair was combed regularly, and beards were trimmed or shaped, depending on local fashion. Noblemen often employed barbers, not only for haircuts but also for shaving and minor medical procedures. The medieval barber's role shows that personal care remained important even when full bathing was infrequent. Hand-washing was especially emphasized. Before eating meals, it was common practice for individuals to rinse their hands using a small pitcher of water poured over a basin. In noble households, servants performed this task for guests, sometimes using decorative jugs and bowls. Clean hands were essential because meals were eaten directly with fingers, bread, or knives, rather than forks. Washing hands before and after meals helped maintain hygiene and was considered good manners. Foot washing was another occasional practice, particularly after long days of travel or work. Travellers arriving at inns or monasteries might be offered water to wash their feet as a gesture of hospitality. Religious traditions sometimes included ceremonial foot washing as a symbol of humility and care for others. These customs show that washing certain parts of the body held cultural and symbolic meaning, beyond simple cleanliness. The role of monasteries also contributed to hygiene practices in medieval society. Monasteries often followed strict daily routines that included washing hands and sometimes bathing at specific times of the year. Monks lived according to rules that emphasized discipline, moderation, and health. Some monasteries maintained bathhouses or washing areas for their members, Although bathing was usually limited to certain days rather than practiced daily, these facilities sometimes served travelers and pilgrims as well, offering rare opportunities for bathing during long journeys. During festivals, weddings, or important religious holidays, bathing could take on a ceremonial character. Preparing for a major celebration sometimes included washing the body and wearing freshly cleaned garments. These moments allowed people to present themselves with dignity and respect within the community. Because baths required effort to prepare, they often became associated with significant events rather than routine habits. Weather patterns also played a role in shaping attitudes toward bathing. In regions with frequent rain, people might already experience a certain amount of natural rinsing while working outdoors. Although rain does not replace proper bathing, it contributed to a general familiarity with moisture and washing away surface dirt. In warmer climates, bathing in natural water sources was more comfortable, and therefore somewhat more common during summer months. Travel accounts written by visitors to medieval regions sometimes mention bathing practices with curiosity. Some travellers described bathhouses where people soaked in wooden tubs while eating, drinking, and socializing. Others noted communities where washing in rivers during warm seasons was a normal activity. These descriptions remind us that medieval society was not uniform. Customs varied widely depending on geography, culture, and local traditions. Archaeological evidence also provides clues about hygiene habits. Excavations in medieval towns have uncovered items such as combs, ear, cleaning tools, tweezers, and small containers for perfumes or oils. These objects suggest that personal grooming mattered to people of many social classes, even when water was scarce or bathing inconvenient. Individuals still sought ways to care for their bodies and appearance. Another method used to maintain freshness involved frequent changing of clothing layers. Linen shirts and undergarments absorbed sweat and oils from the skin throughout the day. When these garments were washed and replaced, they helped remove accumulated dirt from the body. Because linen could be cleaned more easily than wool or leather, it played a vital role in maintaining hygiene. In a way, laundering clothes served a similar purpose to bathing. The smell of indoor spaces was also managed through various techniques. Floors were often covered with straw or rushes, which could be replaced regularly. Fresh herbs were sometimes scattered among these floor coverings to create pleasant aromas. Smoke from fireplaces also helped dry the interior of homes and reduce dampness, which could otherwise create unpleasant odors. While these practices might seem unusual today, they represented practical solutions within the technological limits of the time. It is also worth noting that the medieval concept of clean was influenced by the environment people lived in. Fields, animals, wood fires, and unpaved roads were part of everyday life. A certain amount of dust, smoke, or sweat was normal and expected. Cleanliness was judged less by the absence of all dirt and more by general orderliness and grooming. Someone with tidy hair, clean linen clothing, and washed hands would likely be considered respectable, even if they had not recently taken a full bath. Over time, bathing habits gradually evolved as technology improved. By the late medieval and early modern periods, soap production increased, urban infrastructure slowly developed, and cultural attitudes toward hygiene began to shift again. Eventually, innovations like plumbing systems, improved heating methods, and scientific understanding of disease transformed bathing into the frequent practice familiar today. When reflecting on medieval bathing habits, it becomes clear that the people of that era were not simply ignoring cleanliness. Instead, they adapted their routines to the limitations and realities of their world. Without running water, central heating, or modern medicine, they developed practical ways to maintain hygiene through grooming, washing specific body parts, changing clothing, and using natural fragrances. In the calm evening atmosphere of a medieval household, the glow of the fire illuminated wooden walls, while family members prepared for rest. A small basin of water might sit near the hearth, used for rinsing hands and faces before sleep. The scent of herbs on the floor mixed gently with the smoke from the fire. These quiet rituals of care and comfort formed part of the rhythm of daily life. Another reason medieval people bathed less frequently was related to the pace of daily survival. Life in the Middle Ages required constant effort simply to meet basic needs such as food, shelter, and warmth. Most people lived in agricultural communities where nearly every member of the household had responsibilities. From a young age, children helped with tasks like collecting firewood, carrying water, feeding animals, or assisting in the fields. Adults spent long hours ploughing soil, planting crops, harvesting grain, grinding flour, baking bread, repairing tools, weaving cloth, and maintaining homes. In such a demanding environment, time itself became a valuable resource. Activities that did not directly support survival were often reduced or simplified, and preparing a bath fell into that category for many families. The rhythm of medieval life also followed the natural cycle of daylight. Without electric lighting, most activities had to be completed before darkness fell. When evening arrived, households relied on candles or small oil lamps, both of which were expensive and limited in supply. Because of this, people tried to finish most of their work during daylight hours. Preparing a bath at night would require extra light and fuel, which were not always available. Instead, evenings were usually reserved for eating, simple chores, prayer, storytelling, or rest. Medieval communities also relied heavily on shared labor and cooperation. Water collection, for instance, was often done at communal wells where many villagers gathered throughout the day. Wells served not only as water sources, but also as social spaces where neighbors exchanged news and conversation. However, because the well served the entire community, people were careful not to use excessive water for personal purposes. Carrying enough water for a full bath could require several trips, and doing so regularly might be seen as wasteful or impractical. In a community where everyone depended on the same source, another practical challenge involved waste disposal. After bathing, the water in the tub had to be removed and thrown away. In modern homes, drains carry water away instantly, but medieval houses lacked such systems. Bath water might be poured outside into the yard or street, which could create muddy or unpleasant conditions if done frequently. In crowded towns where houses stood close together, disposing of large amounts of water could become inconvenient. This further discouraged frequent bathing inside the home. The tools used for bathing were also relatively simple. Wooden tubs were common, but they were heavy and required careful maintenance. Wood could crack, leak, or absorb odors over time. To prevent damage, tubs were often lined with cloth or sealed with wax or resin. Because these tubs were valuable household items, Families used them carefully and stored them when not in use. The effort required to bring out the tub, heat water, fill it, and clean it afterward meant that bathing remained an occasional rather than daily activity. Medieval literature and art sometimes depict bathing scenes, particularly among the wealthy. Illustrations in manuscripts show nobles relaxing in wooden tubs, while servants bring warm water towels and scented oils. These scenes remind us that bathing was still associated with comfort and luxury, especially in higher social classes. In castles and large houses, servants could carry water from wells or rivers and heat it in large kitchens. Even so, preparing such baths required coordinated effort, making them special events rather than everyday routines. Interestingly, bathing sometimes occurred in connection with medical treatments. Medieval physicians occasionally recommended baths infused with herbs or minerals to relieve certain illnesses or pains. Herbal baths might include ingredients such as chamomile, sage, rosemary, or thyme. These plants were believed to soothe the body, improve circulation, and balance the humours. In such cases, bathing was not primarily about hygiene, but about restoring health, according to the medical beliefs of the time. The role of rivers and natural springs also influenced washing habits. Some regions were known for their natural mineral springs, which people believed had healing properties. Travellers and locals sometimes visited these springs to bathe and seek relief from ailments. These early spa-like locations became places where bathing was associated with therapy and relaxation. Although they were not accessible to everyone, they show that medieval people still valued the benefits of water for the body. Another overlooked aspect of medieval hygiene was the cleaning of hands and tools during work. Bakers, cooks, and craftsmen frequently rinsed their hands while working with food or materials. In kitchens, water basins were kept nearby to wash utensils, vegetables, and hands. While these small washings did not replace bathing, they helped maintain basic cleanliness throughout the day. For people working with food, keeping hands reasonably clean was essential to prevent spoilage or contamination. The practice of laundering clothes was also important for hygiene. Washing clothes in medieval times involved soaking garments in water mixed with ashes or simple soaps. Clothes were then scrubbed, rinsed, and hung to dry in sunlight. Sunlight itself was valued for its ability to remove odours and brighten fabrics. Because linen undergarments absorbed sweat from the body, washing them regularly helped maintain personal cleanliness even when bathing was infrequent. This practice effectively transferred much of the cleaning process from the body to the clothing. Smell management played an interesting role in medieval life as well. Since daily bathing was uncommon, people used fragrances and natural scents to keep themselves and their surroundings pleasant. Small sachets filled with herbs or flowers were sometimes carried in pockets or worn on belts. These scented bundles helped mask odours and create a feeling of freshness. In wealthier households, perfumes made from rose water or other botanical extracts were occasionally used. Medieval towns had their own unique challenges regarding hygiene. Streets were often narrow and busy, filled with carts, animals, and market stalls. Waste from animals and households sometimes accumulated in public areas before being cleared away. Because of these conditions, maintaining perfect cleanliness was extremely difficult. Residents accepted a certain level of dirt as part of urban life. Nevertheless, People still attempted to keep their homes relatively tidy by sweeping floors and replacing straw bedding regularly. The concept of modesty also affected bathing customs. Medieval society placed strong emphasis on modest behavior, especially in religious communities. Bathing in public or communal spaces sometimes required separating men and women or scheduling different bathing times. Concerns about modesty may have reduced the popularity of some bathhouses over time, particularly when authorities worried about inappropriate behavior. Interestingly, medieval travelers often noticed differences in bathing habits between regions. Northern Europeans sometimes bathed in rivers during warm months, while in colder climates steam baths were more common. In parts of Eastern Europe and Russia, wooden bathhouses called banyas produced steam by pouring water over heated stones. These environments allowed people to sweat and cleanse their skin even during cold seasons. Such practices demonstrate how geography shaped hygiene traditions. The relationship between cleanliness and morality also played a subtle role. While excessive luxury was sometimes criticized, maintaining a neat appearance was associated with discipline and respectability. Religious teachings often encouraged inner purity of the soul rather than physical perfection of the body. However, many monasteries still required monks to wash their hands regularly and keep their clothing clean as part of maintaining order and discipline within the community. When historians study everyday medieval life, they often emphasize that cleanliness existed in many forms beyond bathing. Brushing hair, trimming nails, washing hands, changing clothes, and airing out bedding all contributed to maintaining health. Even simple acts like opening windows to allow fresh air into a room were considered beneficial for well-being. Seasonal festivals sometimes provided opportunities for bathing and washing clothes on a larger scale. Before important holidays, families might prepare themselves by washing garments, cleaning homes, and occasionally bathing. These preparations symbolized renewal and readiness for celebration. Such events show that bathing could still be meaningful even if it was not a daily practice. Another interesting detail is that medieval people often believed sweat itself helped cleanse the body. Physical labor and exposure to warmth caused sweating, which they believed pushed impurities out through the skin. For this reason, sweating during work or in steam baths was sometimes seen as beneficial for health. Instead of relying solely on water washing, the body's natural processes were considered part of maintaining balance. Over centuries, attitudes toward bathing slowly changed as societies developed new technologies and scientific knowledge. Improved soap production, advances in medicine, and the gradual development of plumbing systems eventually made frequent bathing more practical. What once required hours of preparation and heavy labor could eventually be done in minutes. Looking back at medieval bathing habits reminds us that everyday routines depend greatly on available technology and cultural understanding. The people of the Middle Ages lived in a world without modern conveniences, yet they still found practical ways to care for themselves and their communities. As we continue to imagine the realities of medieval life, it becomes clearer that bathing habits were closely connected to how people understood the human body and the natural world around them. Medieval people did not see the body in the same scientific way we do today. Instead, they believed the body existed in balance with nature, climate, diet, and daily activity. Health was thought to depend on maintaining harmony between the body's internal fluids and the environment. Because of this belief, many people approached bathing carefully, thinking that too much washing could disturb the body's natural balance rather than improve it. Medieval physicians often warned that bathing should be done in moderation. Warm baths were believed to soften the body and relax the muscles, which could be beneficial after illness or exhaustion. However, doctors sometimes warned that frequent bathing could weaken a person's strength or make them more sensitive to cold air. Since people lived in houses without proper insulation or heating systems, stepping out of warm bath water into a cold room could indeed cause discomfort or illness. These concerns reinforced the idea that bathing should be occasional and purposeful rather than routine. The physical environment of medieval towns and villages also influenced washing practices. Many streets were unpaved and became muddy during rain or dusty during dry seasons. Animals such as horses, pigs, and chickens moved freely through public areas, adding to the general dirt of daily life. Because people expected to encounter mud, dust, and smoke regularly, they focused more on managing visible cleanliness than removing every trace of dirt from their bodies. Washing hands, wiping the face, and brushing clothing became the practical ways to maintain a respectable appearance. Another aspect of medieval life that affected bathing was the widespread use of fireplaces and open hearths inside homes. Cooking, heating, and light all came from the same fire located in the center of the house or along a wall. Smoke from the fire often filled the room before escaping through a small opening in the roof or chimney. Over time, this smoke settled on walls, clothing, and skin. As a result, the smell of smoke became a normal part of everyday life. People did not necessarily view it as unpleasant, because everyone shared the same environment. Bedtime routines also reflected medieval approaches to hygiene. Before going to sleep, people sometimes washed their hands and faces in a small basin of water kept near the hearth. Combing hair before bed helped remove dust and tangles accumulated during the day. Bedding made of straw or feathers was shaken out or replaced periodically to maintain comfort and cleanliness. These simple habits helped people feel refreshed without the need for a full bath. The design of medieval furniture and household items also reveals how hygiene was practiced. Wooden basins, ceramic bowls, and metal pitchers were common household objects used for washing. These items were small enough to carry easily and required only a modest amount of water. Because they were practical and convenient, they were used frequently for spot cleaning. This method allowed people to maintain a reasonable level of hygiene within the limits of their environment. Travel during the medieval period often lasted days or even weeks, which made regular bathing even more difficult. Roads were rough, journeys were long, and travelers carried only the essentials with them. When possible, travelers washed in rivers, lakes, or roadside streams. Inns sometimes provided basins of water for washing hands and faces, but large baths were rare. Pilgrims traveling to religious sites often focused more on spiritual devotion than physical comfort, accepting the hardships of travel as part of their journey. Markets and town gatherings were important parts of medieval social life, and people often made efforts to appear presentable for such events. On market days, villagers from surrounding areas gathered to trade goods, sell produce, and share news. Before attending these gatherings, individuals might wash their hands and faces, comb their hair, and wear their cleanest garments. Even without bathing, these preparations helped people present themselves with dignity within the community. Another fascinating aspect of medieval hygiene involved the care of hair. Hair was seen as an important part of personal appearance, and both men and women took steps to keep it tidy. Combs made from bone or wood were widely used, and many archaeological excavations have uncovered finely crafted combs from medieval settlements. Regular combing helped remove dirt and lice, which were common in crowded living conditions. Oils or herbal mixtures were sometimes applied to hair to improve its appearance and scent. Beards were also an important feature of medieval grooming. In some periods, men wore long beards as a symbol of maturity or status, while in other periods, shorter beards or clean. Shaven faces were fashionable. Barbers provided services such as trimming beards, cutting hair, and sometimes even performing simple medical procedures like bloodletting. The barber's shop became an important place for grooming and social interaction in many towns. Clothing maintenance was another key element of cleanliness. Garments were carefully brushed to remove dust and dirt, especially outer wool garments that were difficult to wash frequently. People often aired their clothing outside to allow fresh air and sunlight to remove odors. Sunlight was particularly valued for its ability to brighten fabrics and reduce smells. This simple method helped keep clothing fresh between washings. The presence of animals within medieval households also influenced hygiene routines. In rural areas, animals such as chickens, goats, or pigs sometimes lived close to human living spaces, especially during colder months when shelter was needed. While this arrangement helped protect animals and provide warmth, it also introduced additional dirt and odors into the household environment. Because such conditions were normal, medieval people developed practical ways of managing cleanliness rather than trying to eliminate every source of dirt. Another factor that discouraged frequent bathing was the lack of strong soaps or disinfectants. While soap existed, it was usually made from animal fat and wood ash, producing a rough and sometimes harsh substance. This type of soap worked better for washing clothes than for frequent use on the skin. Instead of relying heavily on soap, people cleaned themselves through rinsing, scrubbing with cloths, and using herbal mixtures that were gentler on the body. In wealthier households, bathing sometimes became a more elaborate event. Servants prepared the bath by heating water in large kettles and carrying it to a wooden tub placed near the fireplace. Fragrant herbs or oils might be added to the water for comfort. After bathing, the individual would dry off with linen cloths and dress in fresh garments. Such baths were enjoyable experiences, but still required considerable preparation, which is why they were not daily occurrences. During certain seasons, particularly in summer, bathing opportunities increased. Warm weather made it more comfortable to wash in rivers or lakes, and agricultural work often brought people close to natural water sources. Young people sometimes swam or bathed together in these waters as a form of recreation. These moments of relief from the heat provided both cleanliness and enjoyment. The medieval perception of dirt also differed from modern views. Dirt from soil or farming was often considered natural and harmless because it came directly from the land that provided food and livelihood. In contrast, foul smells from rotting waste or stagnant water were more strongly associated with disease or danger. As a result, Medieval people focused more on removing unpleasant odors than eliminating every speck of dust or soil. Community traditions also helped maintain a sense of order and hygiene. Periodic cleaning of homes, washing of bedding, and replacing of straw floor coverings were common practices. These tasks often took place during seasonal transitions, such as preparing for winter or spring. Cleaning the home was seen as an important part of maintaining health and comfort for the entire household. As the centuries passed, European societies slowly began to rediscover the value of more regular bathing. Improvements in urban infrastructure, trade, and technology gradually made soap more available and water systems more organized. Scientific discoveries about disease and hygiene eventually transformed public attitudes toward bathing. By the time modern plumbing and indoor bathrooms became common, the daily bath or shower had become an accepted part of life. Looking back at medieval bathing habits reminds us that historical lifestyles were shaped by the tools, knowledge, and environments available at the time. What might seem unusual today was often the most sensible approach within those circumstances. Medieval people balanced cleanliness with practicality, conserving their resources while still maintaining routines that helped them feel comfortable and presentable. In the quiet calm of a medieval evening, after a long day of labour in fields or workshops, families gathered around the warm glow of the hearth. Hands were washed in a basin of water. Hair was combed, and clean linen garments were prepared for the next morning. Though simple by modern standards, these small acts of care reflected a thoughtful approach to daily life. Cleanliness was achieved not through constant bathing, but through steady habits woven into the rhythm of medieval living. Even when bathing was not a daily activity, medieval societies developed many subtle habits that helped people maintain a sense of personal order and comfort. One of the most important of these habits was the regular airing of the body and clothing. People understood that fresh air had a cleansing effect. On warm days, garments and bedding were often hung outside on lines, fences, or bushes, so that wind and sunlight could remove moisture and odors. Linen shirts, blankets, and straw bedding were frequently exposed to open air, which helped reduce smells and dampness inside homes. Though simple, this practice was one of the most effective forms of hygiene available at the time. Another everyday routine involved cleaning the skin with cloths. Instead of filling a large tub with water, people often used a bowl or pitcher to dampen a cloth and wipe parts of the body. This method allowed them to wash areas such as the face, neck, armpits, and feet without using large quantities of water. These partial washings were quicker and required far less preparation than a full bath. For people who worked long hours, this approach made practical sense because it removed sweat and dirt from the most sensitive areas while conserving both water and fuel. Medieval clothing also played a surprisingly important role in keeping the body clean. Linen undergarments were worn close to the skin and absorbed sweat throughout the day. Because linen could be washed and dried relatively easily, people often changed these garments regularly, even if they did not bathe frequently. In this way, the clothing itself acted as a barrier that captured dirt and oils before they reached outer garments or accumulated on the skin. When the linen was washed, much of that dirt was removed. This simple system helped maintain hygiene in a time before modern bathing routines. Foot care was another aspect of cleanliness that received attention in medieval life. Many people walked long distances each day, often on rough or muddy paths. Washing the feet at the end of the day could bring relief from fatigue and remove dirt from between the toes. In some religious communities, washing the feet of guests or travelers was considered an act of hospitality and humility. This gesture symbolized kindness and respect, demonstrating that cleanliness carried both practical and social meaning. Another interesting element of medieval hygiene was the treatment of hair. Long hair was common for both men and women in many parts of medieval Europe, and keeping it clean and manageable required effort. People combed their hair daily to remove dust and small insects. Combs made from bone, antler, or wood were common household objects, and archaeologists have discovered many beautifully carved examples in medieval settlements. Regular combing helped keep hair orderly and reduced the presence of lice, which were a common problem in crowded living conditions. To improve the smell of hair and clothing, people sometimes used herbal rinses made from plants such as rosemary, mint, or chamomile. These plants were soaked in water to produce a lightly scented liquid that could be poured over the hair or used to wipe the skin. Such herbal mixtures not only produced pleasant fragrances, but were also believed to have healing or cleansing properties. The cleaning of bedding was another routine that contributed to hygiene. Beds in medieval homes were often filled with straw, feathers, or wool. Over time, these materials could accumulate dust and moisture, so they were occasionally replaced or aired out. Fresh straw might be added to mattresses or floor coverings to create a cleaner sleeping environment. In wealthier households, linen sheets were washed and dried regularly, adding another layer of cleanliness. Public life also encouraged certain hygiene habits. When people attended church services, markets, or community gatherings, they made an effort to look presentable. This often meant washing the hands and face, combing hair, and wearing the cleanest available clothing. Even without bathing, these steps helped individuals appear respectable and prepared for social interaction. Medieval cooks and bakers also followed practical hygiene routines. Because food preparation required handling ingredients directly with the hands, cooks frequently rinsed their hands while working. Water basins were often kept in kitchens for washing vegetables, utensils, and hands. Although medieval people did not understand germs in the modern scientific sense, they recognized that clean hands helped keep food safe and appetizing. Another factor influencing bathing habits was the relationship between humans and nature. Medieval people spent much of their lives outdoors, working closely with soil, animals, and crops. Dirt from the land was not always seen as harmful. In fact, the earth itself was often viewed as a source of life and nourishment. As a result, a certain amount of dirt was considered natural and unavoidable. People focused more on removing foul smells or sticky sweat than eliminating every trace of soil from their bodies. Seasonal bathing traditions also existed in some communities. During warm summer months, rivers and lakes became places where people could cool off and wash away the sweat of long working days. Swimming or bathing in natural water sources sometimes became a recreational activity, especially for younger members of the community. These seasonal baths offered moments of refreshment during the hottest parts of the year. In colder seasons, however, Bathing in open water was nearly impossible in many regions. Rivers froze, and the cold air made wet skin uncomfortable or even dangerous. During winter, people relied almost entirely on small washing routines indoors. They might warm a small amount of water near the fire and use it for washing hands and faces before meals or bedtime. The role of scent in medieval culture also reveals how people approached hygiene. Pleasant smells were highly valued, and unpleasant odours were often associated with illness or decay. Herbs such as lavender, thyme and sage were placed around homes to produce refreshing scents. Sometimes these herbs were sewn into small cloth bags and carried on the body or hung in living spaces. These practices helped create an atmosphere that felt clean even without frequent bathing. Another important element was the maintenance of tools and household items. Cooking pots, wooden spoons, and drinking cups were rinsed and cleaned regularly. Even though water was limited, maintaining clean utensils was necessary to prepare food properly. In this way, hygiene extended beyond the body to the entire household environment. Travelers who visited medieval regions often noticed that bathing customs differed widely from place to place. In some northern areas, steam baths similar to modern saunas were used to clean the body through sweating. Heated stones produced steam that opened the pores and allowed people to wash away dirt afterward. These traditions showed that some communities still valued more thorough bathing methods even when other regions practiced simpler routines. Medieval children learned hygiene habits through daily observation. They saw their parents washing hands before meals, combing hair in the morning, and changing linen garments. Over time, these habits became part of the natural rhythm of life. Cleanliness was not taught through formal rules, but through repetition of simple practices within the household. The relationship between bathing and celebration also remained important. Before weddings, festivals, or religious holidays, people sometimes took special care to wash themselves and wear freshly cleaned garments. Preparing for such events gave bathing a symbolic meaning associated with renewal, joy, and respect for important occasions. Although the medieval world lacked many conveniences we take for granted today, its people still demonstrated a thoughtful approach to personal care. They balanced the effort required for bathing with the realities of their environment. Through grooming, clothing care, herbal fragrances, and occasional baths, they maintained a level of cleanliness suited to their time. As night settled over a medieval village, and the last glow of daylight faded behind wooden cottages and stone walls, families prepared quietly for rest. A basin of warm water might pass from one person to another as hands and faces were washed after the day's work. Hair was combed, fresh linen laid out for the morning, and the scent of herbs drifted gently through the room. These small routines, repeated day after day, formed the quiet foundation of hygiene in medieval life, showing that even without frequent bathing, people still valued comfort, order, and care in their daily existence. As we look deeper into everyday life in the medieval world, it becomes clear that bathing habits were part of a larger pattern of living that emphasized practicality and adaptation to the environment. People in the Middle Ages developed routines that fit naturally within their surroundings, and these routines often focused more on maintaining balance and comfort, rather than achieving complete physical cleanliness as modern society defines it. Bathing was simply one small piece of a much broader system of daily habits that helped people remain healthy and presentable. One important aspect of medieval hygiene was the morning routine. When people woke up, they often began their day by washing their hands and faces using a small basin of water. This simple act helped remove sweat or dust accumulated during sleep and refreshed the body before beginning work. Combing the hair was also a regular part of the morning ritual. A tidy appearance was valued, especially when interacting with neighbors, customers, or community members. Even though these actions required only a small amount of water, they played an important role. As we continue exploring everyday life in the medieval world, it becomes even clearer that bathing habits were shaped by a careful balance between effort, environment, and cultural beliefs. Medieval people lived in a time when nearly every task required physical labor. Fetching water, heating it, preparing a bathing area, and cleaning up afterward could take hours. Because of this, people naturally focused their energy on activities that were essential for survival, such as farming, cooking, repairing tools, and maintaining shelter. Bathing therefore became an occasional activity rather than a routine one, not because people disliked cleanliness, but because the process itself demanded significant time and resources. In many medieval homes, water was treated as something valuable and not to be wasted. A household might collect water several times a day from a well or nearby stream, and every bucket had a purpose. Drinking, cooking, washing dishes, and feeding animals all required water. When families calculated how to use their supply, bathing the entire body often seemed like a luxury. Instead, people practiced smaller forms of washing that used much less water, but still helped maintain comfort and hygiene. One such habit involved washing the face and hands several times throughout the day. Dust from roads, smoke from fireplaces, and sweat from work often settled on the skin. By rinsing the face and hands in a basin of water, people could remove much of this dirt quickly. These small washings were easy to perform and became part of everyday routines, especially before meals or after returning from outdoor work. Feet were another part of the body that people sometimes washed more regularly than the rest. Because walking was the main method of transportation, feet endured constant contact with dirt, mud, and rough ground. Washing the feet at the end of the day helped relieve discomfort and remove debris collected during long hours of movement. In some communities, washing the feet of guests was even seen as an act of hospitality and kindness. The practice of combing hair was also essential to personal cleanliness. Medieval combs were common items found in homes, and they were often carefully crafted from bone or wood. Combing removed dust and insects that could gather in hair during daily activities. Since bathing hair required more water and effort, combing served as an efficient way to keep hair neat and relatively clean. Hair coverings also helped maintain cleanliness. Women often wore veils, scarves, or cloth head coverings, which protected hair from dust and smoke. Men sometimes wore caps or hats for the same reason. These coverings acted as barriers between hair and the environment, helping it stay cleaner for longer periods. Another interesting feature of medieval hygiene was the use of warm cloths. Instead of soaking the entire body in water, people sometimes warmed a cloth near the fire and used it to wipe areas of the skin. The warmth helped loosen dirt and sweat, making it easier to clean the body without needing a full bath. This method was practical during cold weather, when bathing in large amounts of water could be uncomfortable. The design of medieval clothing also supported cleanliness. People wore multiple layers of garments, with linen worn closest to the skin. Linen had the ability to absorb sweat and oils from the body, keeping the outer clothing cleaner. Since linen garments could be washed more easily than heavier wool clothing, they were often cleaned regularly. Changing linen clothing was therefore an important part of staying hygienic. Laundry itself was a major household task that often took place near rivers or streams. Families carried their clothing to water sources, where garments were soaked, scrubbed, and rinsed. The process could take many hours, but it helped keep clothing fresh and removed much of the dirt absorbed from daily work. When clothes dried in the sun, they gained a natural freshness that people associated with cleanliness. The smell of medieval homes was influenced by many factors, including cooking fires, animals, and damp weather. To create a more pleasant environment, people often relied on herbs and plants. Lavender, sage, thyme, and mint were commonly used to scent living spaces. These herbs might be placed on floors, hung from walls, or mixed into bedding. Their fragrance helped mask unpleasant odors and made homes feel cleaner and more comfortable. The presence of animals also shaped hygiene habits. In rural communities, animals such as chickens, goats, or pigs sometimes lived close to human dwellings, especially during winter months when shelter was needed. This arrangement helped protect animals from harsh weather, but also brought additional dirt into the household. Because people were accustomed to living alongside animals, they focused on maintaining order and cleanliness through sweeping, replacing straw flooring, and airing out rooms. Medieval towns had their own challenges as well. Narrow streets, crowded buildings, and busy markets created environments where dust and waste were difficult to manage. Despite these conditions, townspeople still attempted to maintain personal grooming. Before attending markets or gatherings, people often washed their hands and faces, combed their hair, and wore the cleanest clothing they owned. In certain regions, bathing traditions were stronger due to cultural influences. Some communities maintained bathhouses where people could soak in warm water or steam. These bathhouses sometimes served as places of relaxation and social interaction, where friends met to talk and unwind. However, maintaining such facilities required fuel, water, and maintenance, so they were not present in every town. Religious life also influenced attitudes toward the body and cleanliness. Many religious teachings emphasized modesty, discipline, and humility. Excessive attention to physical luxury was sometimes discouraged, but basic cleanliness was still respected. Monasteries often had rules about washing hands and maintaining orderly living spaces. Monks followed structured routines that balanced spiritual devotion with simple hygiene practices. Another factor that shaped medieval bathing habits was the understanding of disease at the time. Without knowledge of bacteria or viruses, people relied on theories that connected illness with air quality, bodily balance, or environmental conditions. Some physicians believed that bathing too often could weaken the body or open the pores to harmful influences in the air. These beliefs encouraged moderation in bathing practices. Even so, water was still valued for its refreshing qualities. During warm summer days, People sometimes bathed in rivers or lakes to cool themselves after working in fields. Such moments provided relief from heat and sweat. Although these outdoor baths were not daily events, they offered occasional opportunities for full body washing. Seasonal changes also affected hygiene routines. In winter, cold temperatures made bathing uncomfortable and sometimes risky. Water could freeze quickly, and stepping into cold air after bathing might cause illness. During these months, people relied heavily on partial washing and grooming rather than full baths. The medieval concept of cleanliness was therefore practical and balanced. Instead of focusing solely on bathing, people combined many smaller habits to maintain personal care. Washing hands, combing hair, changing linen garments, airing bedding, and using herbs for fragrance all contributed to a sense of hygiene. Over time, improvements in technology gradually transformed these practices. As plumbing systems developed and soap production increased, bathing became easier and more common. Scientific discoveries about germs eventually encouraged more frequent washing as a way to prevent disease. When we look back at medieval life, we can see that people were not indifferent to cleanliness. They simply approached it differently, adapting their habits to the tools and knowledge available to them. Their routines were shaped by practicality, community traditions, and the rhythms of nature. In the peaceful quiet of a medieval village at night, after fields had grown dark and the last animals were settled, families gathered near the warm glow of the hearth. A small basin of water might be shared, so that hands and faces could be washed before sleep. Hair was combed, clothing folded, and herbs placed near bedding to scent the air. These gentle routines, repeated night after night, formed the quiet foundation of hygiene in medieval life, showing that even without frequent bathing, people still cared deeply about comfort, order, and dignity in their daily lives. As we continue to imagine daily life in the medieval world, it becomes clear that the rhythm of cleanliness was woven into many small habits rather than centered on frequent bathing. People lived in close connection with the natural environment, and their understanding of hygiene reflected that relationship. Instead of seeing cleanliness as something achieved through daily immersion in water, they saw it as a balance between grooming, clothing, care, fresh air, and occasional washing. One practice that helped maintain this balance was the regular cleaning of the face and eyes. Dust from unpaved roads, smoke from indoor fires, and wind from outdoor work often irritated the eyes and skin. Medieval people sometimes rinsed their faces in small bowls of water early in the morning or before bed. This helped soothe tired eyes and remove particles of dust. Even a small splash of water could provide a refreshing feeling that prepared a person for the day ahead. Another habit involved the care of hands throughout the day. Hands were constantly exposed to dirt through farming, cooking, crafting, and handling tools, because hands were visible and used in social interactions. Even beyond the routines of washing hands, grooming hair, and changing linen garments, medieval life contained many quiet habits that helped people manage cleanliness within the limits of their world. Life was deeply connected to the rhythms of nature, and many hygiene practices were shaped by seasons, weather, and daily labor. Medieval people understood that maintaining order in the home and on the body contributed to health and comfort, even if they did not bathe frequently. One routine that contributed to hygiene was the regular airing of rooms. Medieval homes often had small windows or shutters that could be opened during the day, allowing fresh air to circulate through a house, helped remove smoke from the hearth, reduce dampness, and carry away unpleasant odours. Because fires burned indoors for cooking and warmth, smoke could accumulate inside the home, settling on walls, clothing, and hair. Opening windows and doors whenever weather permitted helped refresh the indoor atmosphere. Another common practice involved brushing clothing and cloaks before entering the house. People who worked in fields or travelled along dusty roads often returned home with dirt clinging to their garments. Before sitting down for meals or resting indoors, they might shake out their cloaks or brush away loose dirt. This prevented excessive dust from spreading throughout the house and helped keep living spaces cleaner. Medieval households also relied on simple tools for maintaining order. Brooms made from bundles of twigs or straw were used to sweep floors daily. Even though many floors were made of packed earth or wooden boards, sweeping removed loose dirt, ash from fireplaces, and scraps of straw that accumulated over time. Keeping the floor relatively clean improved both comfort and hygiene within the home. Another subtle aspect of medieval cleanliness involved the care of eating utensils and dishes. Although tableware was often simple wooden bowls, metal knives, clay cups, people still rinsed these items after meals. Water from a basin or bucket was used to wash dishes before they were dried near the fire. This prevented leftover food from spoiling and creating unpleasant smells in the house. Personal grooming continued to play an important role in everyday appearance. Medieval mirrors, often made from polished metal rather than glass, allowed people to check their faces and hair. Although these mirrors were small and not perfectly reflective, they helped individuals maintain a neat appearance. Straightening hair, adjusting clothing, and wiping the face were simple actions that contributed to self-presentation. The care of beards and facial hair was another form of hygiene for many men. Beards were common in several medieval periods, but they required trimming and grooming to remain tidy. Barbers provided these services in towns and markets. Visiting a barber was not only about grooming, but also about social interaction. People gathered in barber shops to exchange news and conversation, while receiving haircuts or beard trims. Clothing storage also influenced hygiene practices. Garments were often stored in wooden chests or hung on simple pegs attached to walls. To keep clothing fresh, people sometimes placed herbs such as lavender or rosemary inside storage chests. These herbs added fragrance and helped discourage insects from damaging fabrics. In this way, scent and cleanliness were closely connected in medieval households. The cleaning of bedding was another important routine. Beds were valuable pieces of furniture, and their contents needed to be maintained carefully. Feather pillows and mattresses were occasionally shaken and aired to prevent moisture buildup. Straw mattresses, which were common among peasants, were replaced periodically with fresh straw. These actions helped reduce odours and kept sleeping areas more comfortable. Another interesting feature of medieval life was the practice of warming water for limited washing during winter evenings. Even if a full bath was impossible, families sometimes heated a small pot of water over the fire so that members of the household could wash their hands, faces, or feet. The warmth of the water made the process more comfortable during cold months when cold water would have been unpleasant. Communal life also encouraged certain hygiene habits. In villages where neighbors interacted frequently, maintaining a respectable appearance helped preserve social relationships. People understood that arriving at church, markets, or community gatherings with a reasonably clean appearance demonstrated respect for others. Washing visible parts of the body and wearing tidy clothing therefore carried social importance. Markets themselves often included barbers, herbalists, and sellers of scented oils. These vendors provided small luxuries that helped people maintain personal care. A small vial of scented oil or a bundle of aromatic herbs could be used to freshen clothing or the body, providing a pleasant smell that people associated with cleanliness. Travelers who stayed in inns also encountered certain hygiene customs. While large baths were rare, inns sometimes provided basins of water and cloths, so guests could wash their hands and faces after long journeys. This small gesture offered comfort and helped travelers feel refreshed after dusty roads and crowded travel routes. Medieval communities also believed that sunlight and fresh air were natural cleansers. For this reason, blankets, rugs, and clothing were often placed outside during sunny days. Exposure to sunlight helped dry fabrics and remove lingering odors. Although people did not understand the science behind sunlight killing microbes, they recognized that fabrics smelled fresher afterward. The role of religion also shaped daily habits related to cleanliness. Before entering churches or monasteries, people sometimes washed their hands as a sign of respect. Cleanliness in this context symbolized spiritual preparation rather than physical hygiene alone. These rituals reinforced the connection between physical order and moral discipline. Seasonal bathing opportunities sometimes occurred during festivals or warm weather gatherings. Rivers, lakes, or natural springs provided places where people could cool themselves after long days of work. Young people especially enjoyed swimming during the summer months. These moments of washing were refreshing experiences that contrasted with the labor of everyday life. As towns slowly grew during the later medieval period, authorities occasionally attempted to improve sanitation by regulating waste disposal or maintaining public water sources. Although these efforts were limited compared with modern sanitation systems, they reflected a growing awareness of the importance of cleaner environments. The gradual spread of trade also introduced new materials that influenced hygiene. Imported soaps, scented oils, and textiles became available in some markets. Wealthier households sometimes experimented with these products, which made washing and grooming more pleasant. Over time, these innovations helped change attitudes toward bathing and personal care. When we step back and consider the entire picture of medieval life, it becomes clear that people did not ignore cleanliness. Instead, they practiced a form of hygiene suited to their technology and environment. Bathing might have been rare compared to modern standards, but grooming, clothing care, washing hands, airing fabrics, and maintaining homes were all part of everyday routines. In the stillness of a medieval night, when the fields had grown dark and the sounds of the village faded into quiet, families prepared for rest beside the warm glow of the hearth. A small bowl of warm water might be shared for washing hands and faces before sleep. Hair was combed, bedding arranged, and the soft fragrance of herbs drifted through the room. These gentle nightly routines reflected a calm rhythm of life. showing that even in an age without modern plumbing or daily baths, people still cared deeply about comfort, cleanliness, and dignity within the simple patterns of their everyday world. As we continue to look deeper into the everyday habits of medieval society, it becomes even clearer that cleanliness was maintained through a wide range of practical routines, rather than frequent bathing. People adapted their behaviors to the tools and resources available to them, creating systems of personal care that fit naturally within the rhythm of daily life. Bathing might have been occasional, but attention to grooming and household order remained an important part of maintaining health and dignity. One habit that contributed to hygiene was the careful maintenance of household textiles. Medieval homes contained many fabric items such as blankets, tablecloths, curtains, and garments. These fabrics absorbed dust, smoke, and odors from daily life, especially because fireplaces burned constantly for cooking and heating. To keep fabrics fresh, families often shook them outdoors and allowed them to hang in fresh air. Even a short period of exposure to sunlight and wind helped remove moisture and improve their smell. Another common practice was the periodic cleaning of storage spaces. Wooden chests used for storing clothing or bedding were sometimes opened and aired out so that fabrics inside could remain dry. Herbs such as lavender, mint, or rosemary were placed among stored garments to keep them smelling pleasant and to discourage insects that might damage the cloth. This method helped preserve valuable clothing in a time when fabric production required significant effort. The medieval awareness of smell played a strong role in shaping ideas about cleanliness. While modern people often focus on visible dirt, medieval communities were highly sensitive to odors. Pleasant smells were associated with health and comfort.